Been a fairly hot afternoon. It's been 25 degrees centigrade, 27 degrees centigrade, 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So relatively warm, but they haven't moved one single bush since we left them this morning. This is where we left them this morning, and apart from some shade, they've just pretty much moved around the tree. And what's funny is the elephant that was with him this morning is also in exactly the same place. So it's almost like a copy and paste with a whole bunch of hours between the two. Now, for those new to the show, these are 5 male lions that are called the Birmingham boys after a farm in the Manyeleti that they were born on, or property that they were born on. And they are around about 3.5 to 4.5 years old, and they're also in the process of establishing themselves a territory. This makes for quite a hot topic, in that you don't really know where these lions are going to be settling. They could settle here, they could settle in another part of the Sabi Sands, they could settle in the Kruger National Park. Over the last month or so, we've seen them come into and across Djuma once or twice. They've been camped out in Buffelshoek for most of the time, coming out of the Manyeleti into Buffelshoek. But we are hoping, thumbs crossed, that they set up territory here on Djuma. Right here, we have a void of large male lions. There is currently a coalition of 2 male lions, the Matimba males, and they hold sway over 4 prides of lion. And that, although not uncommon in some areas, in the Kruger National Park and Sabi Sands definitely is not the norm. And it leaves a vacuum for these guys to fill. And I'm hoping that they fill it without too much hassle and strife. But before I forget, you're driving with myself. I'm Stefan, and Jean-Andre is on camera behind me. And then there's Jamie and VM on drive. Big yawn, big teeth. And we've got Tara and Christy in FC this afternoon. Excuse me, Kirsty. My cousin's Christy, and I was just on the phone with her before going on game drive. Brains are too full, you know how it goes. So they're sleeping. Generally, lions do like to sleep for roughly 16 to 20 hours a day. And this is what these guys would have been doing pretty much since they were cubs, really. Sleeping during the hottest part of the day. The reason for that is that they are big animals. Each of these male lions weighs in excess of 300 pounds. And that, covered in fur, makes for a lot of metabolic heat generated if they move around during the heat of the day. Energy, and also not to suffer from heat stroke, these lions will try and stay as cool and as calm as possible during the heat of the day. It doesn't mean that they can't move around at all. It just means that they are limited in how much they can move and at what pace they can move. So hunting in midsummer, in the heat of the day, not likely. In the middle of winter, you find lions will be opportunistic around pans and dams and water sources and food sources. And because the days are not as warm, they do have slightly longer activity periods. But they don't look undernourished. In actual fact, they look like they may have eaten as recently as yesterday. This male's just doing some maintenance on his paws. That paw is about the size of a soup plate, to give you an indication on how big it is. And he has 5 claws on that particular foot. 4 claws facing forward and 1 dew claw a little bit further up. And that tongue is actually very rough. For those of you with cats, a lion's tongue feels very similar to a house cat's tongue. It's full of bony projections. And he keeps himself clean with that. He's just doing some maintenance, getting rid of pieces of debris that are stuck between his toes and also in his claw sheaths. They also have retractable claws. And the sheaths that the claws retract into can sometimes get full of meat and hair. Those are some of his sensory organelle, the whiskers. He uses those to judge how wide his body is when he's moving through the bush silently. So those whiskers will protrude forward and help him judge how wide gaps in bushes are that he can squash through when he's trying to be ultra quiet. They could do with another meal. These lions don't have a pride. They would have moved on from their natal pride. Judging from how old they are now, probably about a year to a year and a half ago now. And they would be nomadic. And the reason for that is that Mother Nature has blessed lions with this particular type of lifestyle, so that in the 2 or 2.5 years that they are nomads, they move far enough away from their natal pride that they don't risk inbreeding. Because generally females will accept the most dominant males in their area at the time that they're in estrus. And the most dominant male in that area is usually the father of their babies. And although they can take some inbreeding, it's not really what Mother Nature intended. So they would be nomadic for the last 2 years, 2.5 years or so, moving further and further away from their natal pride into a place just like this, where there's either a pride for them to take over or there's a vacuum that they can fill. So the one lion rolled over just to give his other side access to the wind. And since we got here, this lion that's been quite active, he's been watching us and keeping an ear on the elephant, which isn't too far away. I'd say probably about 50 yards away from us. The elephant itself doesn't pose any danger to the lions. And we'll probably just carry on eating leaves as long as it's left alone, really. Are you welcome to send through any questions that you have about these lions? You can use the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email to questions@wildearth.tv, and we'll see how many we can get through this afternoon. Now, that male that's facing us, the one with his eyes open at the moment, have a look at his belly skin. You'll see that it's folded, it's, for lack of a better word, it's quite saggy. And that's because lions have the ability to bolt large quantities of food in a sitting. They can actually eat about 25% of their own body weight in a setting, which is equal to, probably in their case, about 25 to 35 kilograms of meat. So he doesn't quite have that in his belly at the moment. As you can see, there's still some folds of skin over there that can be filled. Now, last year and Big Cat Week, these guys pulled down some buffalo. And that was oh no, almost, what's it now? It was 8 months ago. I can only imagine that they've gotten better at hunting since then. Large boned herbivores are what they specialize in. Anything in the prey range, generally speaking, between 50 and 200 kilograms. Although combined, they will be able to take down prey easily as big as an elephant. Although with some practice, I can imagine. The northern Chobe, they specialize in elephant hunting in this time of the year. But these guys just generally hunt buffalo, zebra, wildebeest, and giraffe. So the question has come through, do the Birmingham boys have any type of specialization? I don't know them well enough to actually answer that question. I've only seen video footage of them taking down buffalo, which is quite common for coalitions of males like this. So I would say that buffalo would form a part of their diet. Things like zebra, wildebeest, giraffe, definitely. And on the odd occasion, they will scavenge whatever they can from whatever they can. Cheetah, hyena, wild dog, leopard included. But Jamie has got something to share with you, and I'm sure you're going to be enjoying an update about Sindile.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. And as you can see, the big cats of the Sabi Sands appear to be making the most of this really nice warm afternoon after the really chilly start we had to the morning. And we've got Sindile here, still very close to where we left him and relaxing in the late afternoon sun. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie and I will be your guide this afternoon on your Sunset Safari along with Stefan. And I have the wildebeest on camera with me, so thank you very much for joining us. Welcome back to all of our regular viewers, and if there are any new viewers who've just tuned in for the first time, this is a live safari, so what you are seeing on your screen is what we are seeing right now in the Sabi Sands. And we are also interactive, so if you guys want to send through any questions or let us know if you have any comments, feel free to do so at #SafariLive or at questions@wildearth.tv. So this little fella has not moved very far from where I left him this morning, and he does seem to be relaxing. If his mother's shadow did return to him at some point during the day, it was not while we've been keeping an eye on him, and I think perhaps she's gone traveling further afield to go and find food for the both of them. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the ways of leopards, it's very common for a mother to leave her young cub in hiding while she goes off to search for food, and when she does manage to get something, she will come back and fetch him and take him to the kill. So just to give you guys a rough idea of where I am, I'm sitting right pretty much on the boundary between Djuma and Arathusa, so not very far at all from the cut line. If you guys hear any vehicle noises, that's just because of the vehicles using the cut line to and from. I will warn you guys in advance, although we're not far at all from the termite mound that he was on this morning, we are now in a monkey orange thicket, so if there are other vehicles who want to come and see him, then we would struggle to get more than maybe 2 of us, possibly even 1 in here, without disturbing him. So we might not be here for too long with this little guy, just because I don't want to force vehicles to go crashing over the monkey oranges and possibly chase him away or give him a bit of a fright. So when I do hear some other vehicles approaching, then I will be pulling out of this sighting. I don't think he's going to go too far. He looks pretty content exactly where he is. And it's been interesting watching him. He was fast asleep when we arrived. And even though he looked completely fast asleep, every now and again those little ears would just start twitching, obviously in response to a small sound that I couldn't hear. And his whiskers would also occasionally twitch along with his lips. And I hear that you guys have been sitting with Steph and the Birmingham boys and talking a little bit about the amazing structures of the whiskers and the tongue within these big cats. Now, leopards are very similar to lions in that respect. They do have the very rough, spiny tongues that lions do, and they will use it to help get rid of some of the hair on their kills before they start to feed. Not completely effective, but they do manage to get rid of it. And it's also what helps to keep them nice and fresh and clean looking when they use it to groom themselves. And those whiskers are incredibly sensitive. Now, I've been fortunate enough to have an opportunity to study both lion skulls and leopard skulls in the past, just because I am fascinated by the way that these incredible animals are structured. And what was interesting to me, and I had to go and look into it a little bit further before I figured out what was going on, is they have a very large hole in their skull just in front of the orbital cavity and leading into the front of the nose, just in front on either side of the sinuses. And the reason that they have that is actually to provide for a very big nerve channel, so a nerve pathway that goes and leads into the whiskers and around the nose and the tongue. And they need that because there's so much going on in that area in terms of sensory perception. So there's a nice channel, and I'm actually going to show you guys a bit of a picture in a moment, just to give you a rough idea of what it is I'm talking about. Oh, don't worry, I won't block your view of the leopard for too long. So just quickly, this is the skull of a leopard, and these are the holes that I'm talking about. It is difficult to see without a three-dimensional image, but we have the eye socket here, and then these incredible big holes, and this is where the nerves travel down into and around the whisker area. We've also got them on the bottom here. So just a great way of both providing for the muscles in the jaw, which they need obviously for biting and chewing and grasping on, and then for all of the nerve pathways that go through. And up here is where the organ of Jacobson sits. So that is their sensory organ that we have a remnant of, but that doesn't really function as well, and that they use to draw in that scent when they do that amazing phlegm and grimace that most animals do, where they draw back their lips and scrunch up their nose. And that is where they are pulling the scent into, so that they can almost taste the smells that have been communicated to them. So really fascinating anatomy in that respect. And he is now looking quite curiously at me. So he wanted to know exactly why I had a sudden book on my dashboard. Perhaps he wanted to read along with us and learn a little bit more about his own body. And it's always interesting when you're sitting with flat cats, just to think how those sensory organs like the whiskers and the ears and that sense of smell, even if they look completely unaware of their surroundings, they might still be out there, still focused on whatever's happening around them. And that, of course, is essential when you live in a world that is as wild and dangerous as theirs. Just while we've got that gorgeous view of his beautiful light-colored eyes, and while we're on the topic of their senses, leopard sight is very, very similar to lion sight. So they see in black and white, and during the day we'd consider their vision to be not quite as good as ours, but their vision really comes into its most effective at night, where they can see as well as we can see during the day. And that's because they've got the most amazing reflective layer at the back of the eye called the tapetum lucidum that just helps them make the most of any ambient light. And it's always interesting to compare the senses of animals to our senses. So we have developed to the point in an intellectual capacity where we no longer need to rely on our senses such as smell and hearing. So it's reduced to make space in our brains for other more important nerve pathways that are more devoted to intellectual pursuits. But these animals, their brains devote so much more, and they can smell and hear. And I often wish I could live a day in the life of one of these animals, just to see the world through, not necessarily through their eyes, but to perceive the world through their senses. I always imagine how it must be to, in my head, I kind of imagine the smells that they must see and the scent trails almost as a visible pathway. It must be absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure our human brains would be completely bombarded by all of that sensory overload. So guys, while little Sindile here looks perfectly content to spend his afternoon relaxing in the sun and waiting for the call of his mother, I am in fact going to send you back to Steph for a little bit of an update as to what those Birmingham boys have been doing. And I know that they have caused a great deal of excitement amongst some of our more regular viewers, so I don't want to keep you away from them for too long. And I will see you guys a little bit later, hopefully still with our gorgeous little friend here.
Welcome back to the Birmingham boys sleeping underneath a tree here at Juma Private Game Reserve. Not much has changed since you've left us. What is quite nice and what we don't often get is a picture of their paw. And that one young male on the back end of the group, he is obliging us by lifting up his leg so that we can see his paw. And you'll notice clearly those three lobes that we so often refer to while we're tracking what distinguishes cat from a hyena. And very often all we see is the back paw, the paw print. The one that's most visible is the back paw print, and that's because their back paw steps into the footprint of their front paw. It's called registering. That is what leaves the track that so often leads us to these cats when we show them to you on drive. Quite clearly you can see how rounded the edges are of the plantar pad at the back. Female's paws are much more angular now that he's managed to roll over completely. A lot of flies bothering them at the moment. I'm glad that they're attracting the majority of them and not me. So Mao Su on Twitter has asked if there's a ranking amongst the Birmingham boys. And Mao, they would have sorted the ranking out with one another when they were still cubs. You won't find any overt sort of dominance or hierarchy fights between these males. Definitely not anything close to how you do it or what you see in baboon or monkey troops. They will have their own distinct or develop their own distinct personalities. You will find, I'm going to sneeze, excuse me, excuse me, I just had a quick sneeze there and tried not to make it too loud so I'd wake them up and give them a fright. So what you would find, or what I was saying, is that these lions will have personalities developing as they get a bit older. One of them will be more aggressive towards other lions and instigate fights more. One will always roar first. One might even play an instrumental role in hunting and be a little bit more proactive in hunting. One might always be around ladies that are coming into estrus. They definitely develop their own distinct personalities. And those personalities can also change with time. I remember years ago, we had a coalition of 5 young males further south in the Sabi Sands. It came in from the Kruger National Park. And one of the lions was a very proactive hunter. Used to love going after buffalo, used to be right there at the front of the buffalo. Until one day he got cornered by some buffalo and very badly injured, and he lost his eye. He lost his left eye. And this poor lion walked around with his eye hanging on this eye stalk for about a month before it fell off eventually. But I never ever saw him taking the lead in hunting again after that. It sort of changed the way that he approached hunting. He'd always walk at the back of this coalition of males. I can only imagine it was very, very sore for months, and that changed the way he's doing it. That fly is bothering this lion. There must be a biting fly there. You can just see he's not very impressed with what's going on. See the black mane starting to come through as long black hairs along the crest of his mane on the back of his head. That'll fill out as he gets a bit older and a bit more dominant. So Lynn in New Hampshire has asked us a nice question. When they do take over a pride finally, or when they start their own pride, will a hierarchy establish themselves and only one male will be dominant and all the rest will be subservient? The answer to that, Lynn, in this particular area is no. They all share dominance with one another. The coalition, as it stands right now, is one unit. Where we get the impression of one male lion being king of the beasts is from the Serengeti in Tanzania. In the Serengeti, lion cubs are preyed upon very heavily by hyena. And not very many lion cubs, male lion cubs, survive into adulthood. And so not very many lion cubs are there to take over prides. And quite often you only find single male lions in charge of prides, or coalitions of 2 very rarely. And because East Africa was extensively studied by naturalists, and a lot of the reference books that we have are about East African lion prides and the dynamics there, the impression was created worldwide that there is only one male lion in charge of a pride. But the Kruger National Park doesn't have that high a mortality of cubs. It's in and around the 60 to 70% levels. And so a lot of male cubs actually survive into adulthood as litter mates. And what we're seeing here is evidence of that. And they are then better able to take over as pride males or as dominant males. What sometimes happens is as they get much older, so as they approach 7 to 9 years old, you would find siblings splitting away. So in actual fact, cubs from the same mother splitting away to stay with one another, and cubs from another mother splitting away. In the same territory, they won't fight, they will still hold sway over an area, but they will disband, so to say, from time to time, and split and be dominant in different areas and move in different areas together. But brothers will stay bonded for life. Lion societies are very complex. So Laura has asked, would each of these males have a turn to mate, or will the dominant male mate? Laura, just to continue the theme with what we're talking about, there is no single dominant male. They are all dominant over the area that they'll take over. They will share dominance. Some males, though, are just more responsive to females in estrus than others. And you might find that one of these males is a bit more responsive and gets there first, so to say, and will have the right then over the majority of females. But they will not vie for dominance over one another. Any male in the coalition getting to a female has rights over that female in a coalition or in a pride. Shame, they are being plagued by flies. So I'm sure this isn't your real name, Football, but Football Expert has asked who will win in a confrontation between the Matimbas and the Birmingham boys. And that's actually been quite a hot topic of discussion today, to be honest with you. We've actually had a lot of fun debating that around the breakfast table and debating it around the camp this afternoon. And I personally think that if the Matimbas put up a decent fight, that they'd actually still be able to trump these guys. These guys, although big, and there are 5 of them, and they are fit and they are strong, are definitely nowhere close to as big as the two Matimba, the coalition of the Matimbas. However, given a few months, I think that we're going to start seeing a tip of that. And I actually can't wait to see if there will be a power struggle for this piece of land between the Matimbas and the Birmingham boys. There's no reason why they shouldn't. The Matimbas hold sway over more than one pride. That is only capable, that's only possible when there's a vacuum of male lions. These male lions are moving into the area with virtually no competition, and confrontations are inevitable. The Matimbas have brand new cubs with a stick pride, and I think we'll put up a decent fight to make sure that these male lions don't kill those cubs. So I think it's going to come down to Lady Luck. Lady Luck will decide what happens in those first few confrontations. The Matimbas have got years of experience, they've got body weight, and they've got something to lose. They're cubs. The Birmingham boys have got youth and energy on their side, strength in numbers, and the willingness to want to take over pride. That the Matimbas are spread too thin to actually really effectively cover. My hope is that these Birmingham boys take over the Nkahuma Pride, or dominance over the Nkahuma Pride, and establish a territory right here on Quarantine and the surrounding bush around Djuma. It seems to be an overlap of a bunch of different home ranges of different prides. And I'm hoping that they set it up. I've seen it before 2 or 3 times. The last time I witnessed a coalition this size come into the Sabi Sands was the Mapocho males. They came in with a bit of a force. I don't think they came in with, or they came in as subtly as these guys, but definitely these are a force to be reckoned with. You'll notice how close they're lying in association with one another. It's just one of those lion things. They are a contact species. They enjoy being with one another. They're social. In actual fact, they're the only social cat. But social behavior amongst mammals is not uncommon. And touching one another, rubbing heads with one another, hunting together, eating together, pretty much constantly being with one another for years at a time, forges very strong bonds amongst male lions. And they've had to rely on one another basically since they've left their natal pride. They help keep one another alive. So Kathy in Tennessee has noticed that the manes look very similar to Junior's mane. And that's because, quite rightly so, Kathy, you guessed it, they're still quite young. Their full manes haven't really come into being just yet. Full mane development in male lions is almost as a direct result of them taking over pride, and that boost in testosterone that they get when they are fully mature, that will allow their manes to come in, and those manes will then develop very similar to Hairy Belly's mane. It's been a long time since I've seen a male lion as Hairy Belly, I'll be honest, but we can really expect that these manes fill out over the next couple of years, and we'll see an increase in that long shaggy mane as soon as they manage to establish a territory of their own. At the moment, all the moving through the bush, hunting, running away from other prides, etc., pulls their mane out, and they don't have these long dark hairs that are typical of a prime male, of a pride male. The size of their paws are just enormous. So Sarah in New York, hello Sarah, has asked, can I tell which one is the eldest one? And there is one older one. There's a lion here that's a year and a half older than the other 4. I don't actually know which one it is, to be honest with you. I haven't had a proper look at all of them. They've been lying down pretty much since we saw them. If I were to hazard a guess, I'd probably take it as the one at the back. The one lying flat on his back with his belly exposed. But quite tough to say. At this particular age, they almost all look identical. He will be slightly bigger in every aspect. He'll his skeleton will be bigger and his muscle structure will be bigger. Hopefully they stand up sometime soon and we can actually see them next to one another, and then I'll be able to tell you which one I think is the elder one. Got noises of a herd of elephants around us. It's not just one elephant. The one elephant from earlier has been joined by a few. Can't see any of them actually, but I just hear branches breaking and grass moving. These lions, not a care in the world. They've been in this situation many times. So David from the UK is also one of our Zoomies, has asked an interesting question. How far will scent carry in the bush? Because if we're about 300 or 400 meters away from Djuma Dam, which we are at the moment, he's seeing on the Djuma camera, the dam camera, that there are some buffalo, and he was wanting to know, would their scent carry to these males and would they react? Now, David, that's a good question, because lion senses are very well developed, and we are not that far away from the dam. And I think if the wind was blowing from the dam to us, they would absolutely be able to smell and probably hear those buffalo in the water. I've seen male lion react over kilometers to leopard kills, over kilometers to hyenas squabbling over food. Their senses are really keen. At the moment though, the wind is blowing from us directly parallel to Djuma, and so I think it's highly unlikely that the scent will be carried from either the buffalo to the lion right now, or from the lion to the buffalo. It is a slight breeze blowing, but blowing in an exact easterly direction from where we're standing at the moment, and will probably be carried past the dam. But good question. So, and on that note, I think it would be a good time for an update from Jamie on what Sindile has been getting up to. So while these cats are lying down over here, enjoy Sindile.
So guys, welcome back. And as you can see, we are lucky enough to still be with our very sleepy, potentially somewhat lazy Sindile. And I know that you guys were chatting a little bit about the lion's sense of smell and whether or not they could smell buffalo from their position all the way at the dam. And it is very interesting to think about the way that these animals operate. But also bear in mind that prey animals have an incredible sense of smell as well, which is why it's amazing to me the way that these predators know how to use the wind in order to sneak up on their prey and take them by surprise, despite the fact that they have such incredible senses of smell. And there's actually a couple of theories about the fact that lions will mark their territory not only, and they carry a very pungent scent, so they mark their territory not only because they are warning off other lions, but also because they are putting their scent as far as possible and spreading their scent as far as possible, so that the prey animals actually don't know exactly whether they're smelling an old lion marking or the actual lion moving through the area. So very, very interesting that they know how to manipulate the various ways in the bush and to go out hunting. Now, it makes me think about poor old Tingana, who Steph was following his story for a couple of days and who lost his kill to the Styx lion pride. Now, that is something that we've been discussing at length and considering all of the dynamics that are happening here, because it is something different and interesting from our perspective. So that's something that we are going to be talking about tonight on the Fireside Chat. So guys, please join us. We will be, for the last half an hour of our show, we will be having a little bit of a summary of the week. We'll be discussing some of our highlights and a little bit more about me, since I am new here. So I'm going to introduce myself a little bit better and take that as an opportunity to thank you all for your contributions. But while you guys are joining us for this drive, if you think of any interesting questions about the way that the different predators have interacted, particularly in the last week, from the lion dynamics to the leopards, then please feel free to send them through at #SafariLive or email us on questions@wildearth.tv. And I wonder now what he's smelling. While he was sleeping earlier, when you guys were with Steph, we actually saw him twitching as if he was dreaming. Probably responding to various stimulus in those whiskers and ears. But still staying on the subject of the various physical adaptations that these animals have, it's really, really interesting just to think about the camouflage. So the way that each of the animals has adapted to the way that they hunt. It's an interesting question to wonder which came first. But these glorious spots and rosettes that make this little cat so absolutely beautiful to look at are actually vital in his success in terms of acting as a disruptive coloring and helping him to disappear into the grass. And you can imagine that if, as human beings, seeing as well as we do with our color vision, if we struggle to make him out in the grass, how difficult it would be for something like an antelope to be alert to that kind of threat level, especially if he is hunting and stalking from downwind and making no sort of noise. So it's interesting to compare his type of camouflage to something like a cheetah, which also follows a very similar route, potentially because these guys have evolved as solitary, pretty much essentially solitary animals, with cheetah maybe potentially the males hanging out with two or three individuals. But yet the lion, who hunts in a very similar way in terms of stealth, hasn't needed to rely quite so heavily on disappearing completely into the bush. So although they are lightly colored and very much disappear into the grass, they also can rely on the fact that they're social animals. So there are other members of the pride to help you in the hunt and to help to chase down the animal and to ambush it. A little bit of a stretch there. And this combination of spots or something like stripes, anything to break up the outline of the animal, you don't just see it in the predators, although you'll see it in wild dogs as well and with spotted hyenas. But it's not just with the predators, it's also with the prey animals. So animals like the nyala with their various stripes, and of course the typical example would be the zebra. And it's interesting to think about the fact that as much as we know about these animals, we don't actually know everything there is to know and the reasons behind the camouflage. We all know that the zebra stripes act beautifully in breaking up their outline and disrupting their shape in the bush, but we don't know why, if this is such a perfect camouflage tool, why they are the only animals to actually have this type of coloration in Africa. So very, very big questions, ones that I don't really have answers to, but more importantly, I'm just trying to give you guys something to think about in the way that you view these animals and the way that they all interact with each other, and there is always a reason behind everything that we see. So, just having a look at his glorious fur, Pamela wants to know what color his skin is underneath all of that fur. Welcome, Pamela, to the Sunset Drive, and thank you very much. It is a sort of I would sort of describe it as quite a dark color, very rough, and almost gray in color. Now, I'm not sure whether or not they actually have visible spots in the way that potentially tiger stripes might show up on the pelt. I'm not entirely sure. It's not very common to see a bald patch of leopard skin, but I would be very interested to know. So perhaps if you guys have an answer to Pamela's question, please feel free to send it through to me. I am interested to know. The reason I do know at least the vague color of their skin is just because you sometimes see it in the underside of the inside of their thighs, where it's rubbed the fur away slightly, so you can get a little bit of a glimpse at the skin that's underneath the fur. But I don't know whether their skin actually has spots or not on it, and I'd be very curious if you guys could find out the answer for me. So just while we're continuing our comparison of leopards and lions, and it is a very interesting one just because they fill similar niches in the environment but operate in such different ways. Lion's skin underneath the fur will be quite a similar color, maybe slightly lighter, I'm not sure, but I would put it on pretty much the same color as the leopard skin. And I know that there is a fierce ongoing debate amongst the various presenters of WildEarth and the viewers as to why it is that a lion will have a black tip to its tail and a leopard will have a white tip, and then a cheetah is slightly different with the stripes wrapping around the rings, and why it is that those are so different. For what it's worth, I'll try and give my opinion. I haven't thought it through thoroughly. It is the first time I've thought about this, which is why I love this job so much and why I love the questions that you guys send through. I would say that both black and white serve a very similar purpose, but possibly because of the habitat that the leopards live in and the fact that they are solitary, it's more important to have a tail that's highlighted by white, which is potentially even more visible in the bush than black, especially so that they can get their cubs to help or to follow behind them. It's difficult because the spots at the end of the tail also, it depends on which angle you look at it as to which color it is, but more often than not I've spotted a leopard just because it's flicked the whiteness and the whiteness has caught my eye. So maybe that is why, because it's easier for the females to lead their cubs that way, especially because they're solitary, whereas lions, they tend to den their cubs and actually move backwards and forwards from the cubs. But there are more members of the pride to help keep an eye on them. I'm not sure that's a theory and it's a shot in the dark, and one that I've kind of only just come up with now. It might also be a similar purpose to both of the colors, and one just happened to be white and one happened to be black. So just an emphasis on a part of the body that is so important in highlighting visual cues between individuals. So, very interesting question from Football Expert, and one that I sort of started to touch on but maybe didn't fully explain while I was chatting about this. But Football Expert would like to know why it is that lions and leopards have evolved or developed such a different camouflage approach when they live in very similar environments and similar habitats. And I think the answer to that is because lions are group members. They hunt in prides, so they have more individuals, so the necessity to rely completely on stealth is not there. So they can rely on the other pride members to help hunt down and get the prey. Whereas with leopards, they are solitary hunters, so it's really, really important to them that that success rate is high and that they can get as close as possible to the prey before they get it. Because I would say, most definitely, hands down, the leopard approach to camouflage is more effective than the lions. And it's interesting to see that with lion cubs, they follow the very similar approach as leopards. So lion cubs have those sort of tawny spots all over them, just to help increase their camouflage until they're a little bit safer, a little bit larger, and able to look after themselves and defend themselves. So that would be my answer to that question. Again, these are all theories and just based purely on my observations of the animals and their hunting techniques. So guys, from what we can see, this little guy is not going to stir anytime soon. I think he's going to be flat cat for a long time yet. And I also think that we've been in this sighting long enough. There are other vehicles who are on their way to come and see him. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't really want to get in their way too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull out of here and go and follow up on that elephant herd that many of you reported seeing at the Arathusa waterhole. So for now, while I maneuver my way back out of this rather thick bush, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys for now. I'll send you back across to Steph, and I will see you a little bit later, hopefully with some elephants.
And welcome back to us. And we are still at the Birmingham, boys. There is less than no movement coming from them at the moment. They are unconscious, storing up some energy for this evening. We haven't seen them this far. Well, we haven't seen them into Juma this far for about 8 months or so. And it's going to be interesting to see what they get up to tonight. We're all looking forward to seeing what movement they're going to be doing. Are they going to cross through and go south? Are they going to go west? Are they going to go back north and go back into Buffelshoek? It's all just a bit of a guessing game at the moment, and what makes it exciting, you know. This elephant herd is still right here in the valley next to us, and every now and again one breaks a branch and causes one of the lions to lift his head up. And I hear that you've been talking to Jamie about camouflage and a bunch of different things, the difference in coat colors and textures. What's quite nice is that lion there at the back, you can see how their coat, or how his coat almost exactly matches the color of the grass behind him. That now, if you can put that when in the day it's almost the same color, imagine it being a pitch black night, not a full moon, wind making the grass move, mane moving with it. These lions would be all but invisible at night time in a grassland. John Boy has asked, do we have any updates on the Nkuhumas, which we've been talking about throughout the day, because I'm hoping, just it's a personal thing, that these lions take over control of the Nkuhuma pride. And yesterday, myself and VM tracked the Nkuhumas into Torchwood. Their tracks went north, away from where they were just finishing off that buffalo from a bit earlier in the week. And they haven't crossed back in again, not that we could tell, at least anyway. I think the presence of the Styx pride, the lioness with the cubs, has kept them a little bit further north, and potentially because of the Matimbas being around the ladies with the cubs, and who knows if these guys have had any effect on that as well. But they do wander into Buffelshoek and Torchwood. Both of those properties are on our north and our eastern boundaries. But you know, we give it a couple of days and I'm sure they'll come back again. So Matt from Texas has asked a nice question. Would these male lions take over all the prides simultaneously from the Matimbas? Would they do it one by one? Would it be all in a big showdown, in one big fight? You know, what would happen? What's the most likely course of action to happen? Well, Matt, unfortunately, unlike I suppose stories would have us believe, pride takeovers take a long time. It's not something that happens over a fight or over a one-night thing. They don't have one decisive battle. Rather, it's a build-up of pressure and a constant build-up of pressure. And there will be a couple of scraps. And there will be a couple of epic scraps as well in that. I have no doubt that when these guys start fighting for territory, if the Matimbas decide to put up a fight for any of the four prides that they hold sway, that we can start seeing some epic battles. Now, obviously in the documentaries that we watch, it's really difficult at night time when you've got running lions around to film this interaction. And so it becomes difficult for us to access this information because it's not filmed and it's not portrayed in documentaries and filming. But it does happen. Living out here in the bush, we can absolutely see evidence of it. Male lions bleeding, injured, roaring, pressure. But in all the pride takeovers that I've ever witnessed, it's always taken about 6 months. Now, the other part of the question is whether or not they'll take over all four prides that the Matimbas hold sway over. I can just say to that it's unnatural for a coalition of males, especially two males, to hold sway over so many prides. Generally speaking, lions will hold sway over one pride, with the exception being 2 and 3 inner in a vacuum that's created. In this particular case, there's a vacuum of male lions in the northern Sabi Sands. The Matimbas have come out of the Manyeleti, and the Birmingham boys have come out of the Manyeleti, and I think they're just going to be filling up a piece of this vacuum. I think that it's very plausible that the Matimbas will not be ousted from anything. They're not going to be replaced by the Birmingham boys. I think that they're just going to give a little bit of ground, and they will lose one or two of the prides that they hold sway over. The nice thing is that we don't really know. I can only draw from what I've read and what I know and what I've experienced. But you might find that a brand new chapter in my understanding of lion pride dynamics is opened up by these moving in, and we learn something completely new from them. All I can say is that they're at the right age to start that pressure right now. I still think a bit young. I still think that the Matimba the coalition of Matimbas will put up a good fight. They have experience and age and wisdom on their side, and they are bigger. They are physically bigger. And that in lion dynamics, male lion dynamics, counts for a lot. Physical presence counts for a lot. I don't think that these males have started to roar just yet, but those Matimbas, they put on a good show around when they're in their territory. And that'll be the first thing that these lions will know of these Matimba males. They absolutely know of one another already. I have no doubt that these Birmingham boys have been hearing the Matimba males roar for weeks, months, potentially even years. I haven't heard them roaring back. They may be roaring already. I think I may have a reference coming into my memory from a week or two ago where we had some roaring coming from Buffelshoek, and there was some speculation that it might be them, which is good. Like I say, this gradual ramp up in pressure. It'll start with roaring, and then it'll be scent marking, and then it'll be infringements in one another's core territories. We have another one of my colleagues coming into this particular sighting. I just want to warn Lex that one of his guests is standing on the back of the car. Lex, one of your guests are standing on the back of your vehicle. By the way, good afternoon. Good to see you again. Now, the reason why I did that was because lions out here get very used to a single profile, and it's that profile that we try not to change. And it's very, very dangerous when you're this close to lions to change the status quo, how you behave around these lions. And if you were to stand and single yourself out at this distance from lions, there's a very good chance that they have a negative reaction to you. And being this close, you absolutely don't want to force that lion into a flight or fight decision with you. Finding you? Good to see you again. Yeah. I am. Just for this week driving. So a quick catch up amongst colleagues around a lion sighting is always a good idea. So Jerry, and I'm told, Jerry, that you're a new viewer and only have been watching the show for a couple of days now, but are a supporter, a stalwart supporter. Well, I'd like to welcome you personally, and well done on moving over to watching wildlife with us. You've asked a question, how full do lions stay? How long does meat stay in a lion's belly for? Well, to answer that question, I'd say excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. It's the last remnants of a cold I've been battling over. Lions can bolt an enormous amount of food. You're looking at 25 to 35 kilograms per lion. That food will move through their system relatively quickly. And the reason for that is because any meat staying for a very long time in their system becomes poisonous. So they have a very large small intestine. Meat gets into their tummy, it gets mixed with all the juices that it needs to, it goes into their small intestine, and as quickly as the lion's body can, it draws out the nutrients from that. And then they discard the meat before it becomes poisonous. So lions lose condition very quickly if they don't eat. So you find that a lion that's full today will start hunting again 24 to 48 hours after he's eaten, and after 2 weeks of no food will look like you or I would after 2 weeks of no food, quite skinny and quite desperate. And I've seen lions go for about a month to about 8 weeks at most without any food, lions that are very badly injured, and they look absolutely shocking, just literally skin over the bones. But I very rarely have seen lions die of starvation. Quite often they do some miracle, they kill something by some miracle, and they bounce back incredibly quickly. I'll just stand by for one. Anthony, were you calling Steph? Oh, sorry, Anthony, I was just presenting. You are welcome to join. There's just two vehicles in this particular position. Static in the same place. Shortcut Gallagher, just on the side of the road. You'll get us visual, no doubt. So I'm told that Jamie has something much smaller than a lion to show you, and before it runs away, enjoy.
Hi guys, welcome back, and I'm sorry to drag you away from the lions, but I just had to show you one of my favorite little antelopes. And she's been behaving quite nicely, and hopefully she's going to show us some of that behavior that these guys are actually quite famous for. So here we have a little female steenbok. And I have a special soft spot for steenbok because somebody once told me that if I were an animal, I would be a steenbok, which I'm going to choose to take as a compliment. There you go. She's doing it beautifully for us, showing us how steenbok are renowned for burying their urine and their dung, just as a way of keeping themselves a little bit more secret. Because they do move in tiny little territories and they don't want to make themselves too obvious to various predators, so they use that method to just cover up and hide their scent. Very sweet, much in the same way that a cat or a dog, or at least a cat, might do. And she has been cooperating quite nicely, just nibbling around, browsing various grass shoots and little leaves that are still around on the tree. Ooh. You need to be on constant alert out here. Whatever it is, nothing too scary. So when steenbok do decide to run away, they demonstrate the most remarkable, carrying on our theme of camouflage and various color adaptations, they demonstrate this remarkable phenomenon called flash coloration. So underneath that little tail, they've got a very, very white rump and a white patch underneath it on their bottom. And when they do run away, she's actually digging, looking potentially for roots. So when they do run away, they run away with their tail up. So you see that bright, bright flash of white, which, as you can imagine, as a predator, catches your eye immediately. And what they'll do is they'll bounce away for a little bit and then stop dead and drop their tail. And that bright flash of white disappears from view completely. And it works really well because the attention of the predator is still where they saw that last flash of white, and they might miss that steenbok by a crucial couple of meters and allow it to escape once again. And I know that it works because it's worked on me before, where I've thought a steenbok has disappeared from view, only to see it's maybe a meter or two to the side of where I thought it was. So a very, very clever system that they've got going on. And I know that the view isn't... She keeps walking behind the sticks and the trees, but I don't want to turn my engine on in case we lose her and she dashes off. So these guys, like most of the various dwarf antelope, will mate for life. So they defend these tiny little territories. I can't remember the exact size, but it's something in the region of 100 to 300 square meters. So not a huge area at all. Maybe roughly the size of a football field, for example. And they defend these little territories quite vigorously, the males against other males and the females against other females. And a baby steenbok is probably one of the cutest things you will ever see. It's a perfect little miniature of the adult, but absolutely minute. It's interesting, just while we're thinking about the way that the various antelopes have developed and come to be different species, it's interesting that they share the ecological niche that they occupy, which is as a tiny little dwarf antelope making the most of the various hiding places throughout the bushes. So it's interesting how they make the most of that, and they occupy almost exactly the same territory and habitat as something like a grey duiker. They feed on very similar plant matter, and yet they cohabitate in perfect harmony in this area. And you'll find that there is no direct correlation between the numbers. So lots of duiker doesn't mean necessarily that you won't have as many steenbok. And it's also, that's interesting because if you compare it to something like a jackal and a caracal, for example, in areas where there are lots and lots of jackal, there will be fewer caracal, and in areas where there are more caracal, there will be fewer jackals. So there's kind of a direct impact in terms of species numbers there in two animals that occupy a very similar niche, not necessarily exactly the same in that example, but that could be considered species in competition. So just interesting to think about the various ways. I don't have an explanation for why steenbok and duiker are in exactly the same or occupying exactly the same habitat, but it is something interesting just to think about. But for now, we're going to leave this lady to eat her afternoon lunch in peace, and we're still going to see if we can follow up from the reports of those elephants at the waterhole. While you guys were with Steph, I did chat to one of the other guides about where the elephants might be. Apparently they left the dam in a westerly direction, but they have now started to move north. So I've cut around to the north of the dam, and I'm hoping that we can find them somewhere in this area. As we go deeper into Arathusa, there is a very, very good chance that I'm going to need to take out my phone and just double check exactly where we are. Okay, guys, while we are doing that, I'm going to send you straight back to Steph, who's got something potentially very interesting. I'll see you guys later.
Well, welcome back to us, folks. We just unfortunately had to cut that short, and I'm sorry about that, but we've just had a family of warthog walk straight into this particular sighting. You can see this warthog, they're literally 10 meters away. These lions haven't stirred, they don't even know that the warthog are here, but neither do the warthog know the lion are here. One lion has seen these warthog, or he's at least heard some noise. One lion still fast asleep, and now these warthogs have actually changed direction and are moving slightly away from these guys. completely oblivious of one another. Her dinner is just slipping these lions away. One lion has now noticed the warthog. The warthog's too far away for him to actually hunt. Generally speaking, the lions need to be closer than 5 to 10 meters. These warthog are about 15 meters away from these lions. And warthog are very fleet of foot. A little bit too fleet of foot for these lions, I think. And to be honest, I don't even think these lions know that the warthog are there. He's heard some movement in the grass. Warthog have actually moved past now. Good 30 meters or so away now. Dinner gone. It would have been quite a tough hunt for these lions. These warthog would literally have had to have bumped into these lions for them to give chase. A lion stalking a warthog this time of the day and having the advantage of a little bit of distance would definitely, in this type of bush, have outrun these lions. I think these warthog can count themselves lucky that they have another day left. Wow, that was exciting. I must be honest. These warthog were heading right towards these lions, and I thought they were going to jump up and give chase, but no luck, unfortunately. And boom, he goes down again. The lions only really have about a 25% success rate on most hunts. That wasn't even a hunt, it would have been opportunistic at best, taking advantage of the fact that the warthog are moving probably to their evening denning site. So even when they're really trying to hunt, they're only 20% successful. So Megan in California has asked, would an emaciated male lion fall prey to a hyena? And the answer to that question is absolutely. There's a good chance. Most old, sick or dying lion are actually killed by either hyena or other lion, with the majority of male lions actually killed by hyenas mobbing them to death. But that's saying it sounds easy to kill a lion. Lions are incredibly tough animals to kill. I've seen them with broken bones, literally in the worst condition that you can think of, sick. And they have the ability to return from the brink of death like no other animal I've ever encountered in the bush in my life. We've had lionesses in the Sabi Sands, we've had male lions that I reckon are going to die today. We've tracked them by their smell. They've been so sick, and those lions have always arrived at a carcass somewhere, managed to kill something somehow, and tend to survive. He just gave himself a big hug. This is the time of day that's starting to cool down now. And although the sun is still up, within the next hour or so, we can expect these lions to start becoming a little bit more active. It's not warm anymore. Temperature is dropping almost by the minute, in actual fact.
The guards are all under so much pressure to show their clients that they go in and try and do this close. Yeah. Yeah, that was exonerating.
Hi there, Joyce, and you've expressed a concern that that are these lions not feeling a little bit hemmed in or cornered by the presence of two vehicles in the sighting? No, it would be the easy answer to give you, because lions are one of those animals that will really let you know when they start getting upset. And as you can see, they're having absolutely no reaction to us whatsoever. That being said, we have managed to put ourselves with many avenues for them to escape to. They've got behind them, they've got in front of them, and they can go around us very, very easily. There's no cornering here of these cats, and we'll try as much as what we can, in actual fact, not to corner these cats in at all. I go so far as to not wanting to drive straight at these lions. I always approach them from an oblique angle, all in an effort just to let them know that we are not threatening, and to re-establish and reassert that particular respect for them. We respect these lions. If on the way into the sighting a lion had to tell us by way of a growl or by way of a posture change that they were upset with where we were planting ourselves, I absolutely would have respected that. So I drive my guiding based on what the animals tell us, not on what I would like to do. And we were very careful when we drove in here. They have still not reacted to us. They haven't moved at all. So very happy, contented, safe feeling cats right now. So, I'd like to pose a question to the viewers, for those of you who are active on our feeds. Would you like me to stay with these lions, or would you like me to go and look for something else in the bush to show you? So it would be easy for me to do either, and as enjoyable for me to do either. So I'll pitch the idea to you. Would you like us to stay, or would you like us to go? So Sandy in Indiana has asked, do lions have taste buds like we do? Sandy, I'm going to have to say that yes, they have taste buds. Do they act the same as what we's or ours are? Are they as sensitive, or are they as complex in terms of tasting such different things? I'll probably have to say no to that. They definitely have a very, very well developed sense of smell, but it might not be along the same lines as what we do. We taste things so that we can taste how fresh they are to eat or not. And we taste them for ripeness. We taste them for a variety of things to do with our nutrition. Male lions just eat meat. They don't eat anything else. And so tasting whether meat is an impala or a zebra or wildebeest, or whether it's salty or whether it's bitter or whether it's poisonous or burning or acid, wouldn't have any need for the lions. They don't have a need for those types of receptors. But what they do have a need for is to test the markings and the scent markings that other animals leave. So their scent and their taste is usually centered around exactly that, is more from a social point of view rather than a nutritional point of view. They'll be able to, and from a reproductive point of view as well, they're able to test females' urine, for instance, for hormonal status. So yeah, it's a bit of a topic. I mean, I'm not a lion, so I don't really know, and I don't know too much about the physiology. Careful. So something just spooked these lions. As you can see, right back to resting again. So it was probably a bird or a grasshopper or a fly biting one of the brothers, and they jumped up. I must say, at this age, before they get their big manes with those silly crests that they've got on their head, they look quite funny. Beautiful picture that. So just to end off that question, I don't really know much about the physiology or of the actual sensory organelle in a lion's tongue. But just sitting here, just thinking about it, I hope my answer has helped you out. So it is Sunday tonight, and as you all know, or you might know, on Sundays we do the fireside chat, which I will be leaving for in a bit. And you are welcome to start sending us through some questions about what we've experienced during the week. Tonight we're going to be doing a short segment on inter-specific competition between species of predators, and we're going to be debuting Jamie, who has just started with us. She's finished almost her first full week of guiding with us. So you're welcome to start sending through some questions for us for tonight. You can email them to questions@wildearth.tv, or you can send them to the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. And I am told by FC that a lot of people want to stay at the Lions, and good. I also want to stay at the Lions, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We won't be leaving them until we absolutely have to. The light is just getting fantastic at the moment. But while they're just starting to get mobile, or hopefully starting to get mobile over the next couple of minutes, we're going to quickly cross to Jamie. She is lost on Arethusa, and I think a bit of comic relief is just what we need.
So, welcome back everybody, and oh no, they've just disappeared and run away. I don't quite know why warthog are so skittish, but it is an animal that I've been trying to find and still haven't quite managed, but they've disappeared off. Oh, there's one still peeking out. I'm trying to and move a little bit further forward so that we can have a look. Anyway, so since Steph has already told you, I might as well admit to you that I am completely lost. I'm almost certain that we are still on Arethusa. I think unfortunately those warthogs have dashed away. So I am relatively confident that I'm still on Arethusa, so still within the boundaries of where I should be. But beyond that, I am completely lost. And it is an interesting lesson. I'm being a little bit stubborn because I don't want to turn the GPS on my phone. I kind of want to see if I can figure my way out of this myself. There we go. Got an ear poking out of one little warthog. It was a sounder, or a family of warthog. There were a couple of sub-adults also in there. Warthog are very interesting animals, and for me personally, I have very strong memories attached to warthogs, giving me something close to what could only be described as a near heart attack. So when you are walking through the bush, it is very important to check the various termite holes, the holes in the termite mounds, such as you might see looking similar in a way to the hyena den. And the reason for that is that warthog occupy them as their burrows. So they will back their way in, as some of you might have seen with Steph and that very large female. They back into those holes, and if they're starting to feel really threatened that whatever's out of the hole is coming to get them, then they will rush out at it. And when you are walking, I can tell you now from experience that that is not a pleasant experience. We were once tracking lions, and we heard the vervet monkeys and all of the birds starting to go a little bit crazy, all alarm calling, so we knew the lions were very close. We were standing, it was quite a thick area, so we were just skirting around to see if we could enter it more safely. And we stopped for quite a long time just by one of these mounds, and I did check the hole, I didn't think too much of it, and we stood for a long time just listening to the alarm calls, just trying to hear where the animals were. And about 5 minutes into our long silence, a warthog burst out in a cloud of dust and noise, and I can only describe it as an explosion of activity. And we were standing, I mean, we had the guests that we were walking with, they were behind us, so they were sort of directly in that path. Nothing happened. The lead guide and I both had our rifles in hand and were shouting before we'd even registered what had happened. But as it was just a warthog that immediately took one look at the group of people and decided that he was running away. But it did take a long time for the people who were with us on that walk to sort of calm down and stop shaking, because they were all convinced that it was in fact a lion charging out from behind the bush. So warthogs can be interesting little beasties, but for now they have disappeared, and I need to figure out which way to go. So when you are lost in the bush, which is sort of, I wouldn't say I'm lost, I just don't know exactly where I am. But if you are ever lost in the bush, then there's a lot of easy ways to start navigating. So we're lucky today, the weather has cleared up. I know that the west is in roughly that direction, so off to my right. So the sun is setting sort of over there, but it is winter. So the sun moves through the northern half of the sky in the southern hemisphere, but in winter the movement is not quite so pronounced, so it doesn't set directly quite in the west, it sets slightly north of west. So I know that west is that way. I know that I don't want to be going that way because I must be fairly close to the western boundary of Arethusa. So I know that I kind of want to be heading that way. I'm not going to go back, essentially back in the direction that I came from. So we're going to go this way and then probably hook a little bit of a left ahead of me. It is always an interesting experience, and one that when you start working in the bush, you do worry about a little bit, especially because you're concentrating on so much that you don't necessarily always have the map in your hand. But I've also found that getting lost is the quickest way to learn, and there are plenty of landmarks for me. So there's a nice pan. Now in an area such as this, if you pick a direction, one solid direction, and you travel as much as you can in that direction, at some point you are going to hit some kind of cut line that will tell you roughly where you are. I'm also greatly assisted. This isn't the first time I've been lost in Arethusa. I was lost here a couple of days ago before I actually started doing my official drives, just when I was cruising around. Oh, I see elephant tracks. I was cruising around just trying to learn the roads, and I was very grateful for the assistance of all of the construction noises from the lodge, which greatly helped in finding my way towards some kind of marking point. It's all quiet at the moment, but I'm sure that I am on the right track. So a little bit exciting. I enjoy being lost. I think it's important to get lost every once in a while. I can actually see the airstrip from here, so I am definitely on Arethusa. we're driving, we've got a bit of a general question from Umang, who would like to know if there are sausage trees. Okay, we are going to go at something of an angle, so just be prepared for that. So Umang would like to know if there are sausage trees in the Sabi Sands. Welcome Umang, thank you for that question to keep us entertained while I figure out my bearings. So there are sausage trees in the Sabi Sands, of that I'm almost certain, but I've yet to find one in this area. So you might want to start looking more towards the river systems in that general area. I know that there are plenty of sausage trees in Kruger, to the point that you've got to be very careful where you park your car, because those fruits can grow up to this sort of size, and that's where the sausage tree gets its name. It's got quite a large sausage-shaped fruit, and they are very, very heavy, and they do occasionally fall down without any warning. So you do want to be careful not to park your car, or perhaps to have a nap under one of those trees. So it is important that I start traveling in a sort of southeasterly direction. And the reason for that is at some point I've got to get back to you guys so that we can sit down at the fireside chat and just talk a little bit about the various sightings that we've had this week. And I know that Stefan has had a very, very interesting time looking at the various examples of interspecies competition. So what I mean by that is where one species, such as a lion or a leopard or a hyena, competes for the same resources, particularly in this case when Tingana lost his kill to the Styx pride, and the role that interspecies competition has in various areas. So I'm sure that you guys will have plenty of questions about that, and you should definitely send them through before we get started at this fireside chat. So it's #SafariLive and questions at wildearth.tv. Even if you guys just want to know perhaps what is the most common type of competition that we see between predators in this area, anything along those lines, more than welcome. Trundle along in roughly what can only be the right direction. I have a great question from Ashley, and Ashley would like to know a little bit about leopard genetics. Now I was lucky enough yesterday afternoon to see Shadow, the female, and her cub Sindile, but now we will have no idea as to whom Sindile's father is. We might be able to guess based on the various males that are in the area, but we don't necessarily know. And Ashley would like to know whether leopard cubs take more after their mother or more after their father in terms of their genes. So they will, I don't know, I wouldn't claim to be any kind of genetic expert. I know that you can potentially see that certain leopards are related to, for example, to their mothers, but it works in the same way as most mammal species. So the individual will get half of the mother's gene and then half of the father's genes, or half of his chromosomes. Hey, power lines! You definitely can't be that wrong. So this maybe isn't the perfect place to go into a complete breakdown of how genetics works, but there are different types of genes that express themselves in a physical form, in the way that an animal looks. And certain types are more dominant over other types. So let's say we're looking at eye color. In leopards, perhaps that yellow color might be dominant over the blue color. So if a male breeds with a female, his genes might come through. If he's got yellow eyes, it will then give the offspring yellow eyes. I know that's a little bit of a complicated explanation, so I'm just taking a random example. I don't know that to be true. But it will just depend very much on the types of genes that are being passed on. But an individual will get 50% from his father and 50% from his mother, and it just depends on whose particular genes come through more strongly. From Markham, Ontario in Canada has sent us an interesting and very clever little play on words there, asking whether leopards ever change their spots. But she goes on to explain that what she's asking is, does their fur color change as they age? Can you tell their age by their fur color? Well, Lynn, thank you for that. I did appreciate that clever little phrase. As far as I know, there isn't much change in coloration of leopards. They might get slightly lighter from the color that they are as cubs to the color that they are when they are adults, and maybe they potentially get a little bit lighter as they age, but don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think so. I mean, I haven't noticed, and I've seen a couple of generations of leopard cubs grow up, and I don't think that they change their fur color very much. When you are aging a leopard, you're looking more at the nose color and the condition of the canine teeth, very similar to the way that you age lions. So guys, I know where I am. I am on Parallel Road South. So now that I've found my bearings, thank you for putting up with my slight confusion and vague meandering through the bush. But it's always fun, and there's plenty to look at out here. But for now that I know where I am, I'm gonna make my way back to Djuma, and for that, I'm gonna send you back to Steph, and I will see you guys just a little bit later.
Well, welcome back to us. We have some signs of life and a big yawn. Here we go. These lions just going through their waking up ritual. Although they sleep for so long a day, they definitely are active, and when they are active, they are active, highly active, mobile, vocal. Takes a lot of energy to do what they're doing, and they don't always get that energy back at the end of the day. Unlike a buffalo or a impala, grass and leaves are everywhere. For lions to do what they need to do and hunt food is a difficult thing sometimes. You definitely need to consider conserving energy. You can see he's also having a bit of a cleaning ritual now. Now usually what happens is they'll each have a turn. He might even go back to sleep again. There's a good chance that he gets up and he goes over to one of his brothers. There we go, one's having this one close to us, having a bit of a stretch. But they're definitely starting to show some life at the moment. Now, what's quite amazing is that they're only lying about 100 or 200 meters away from where we're going to be doing fireside chat tonight, and I've got every expectation that they're going to be making an appearance. Lions at nighttime are incredibly inquisitive animals. And with all the commotion that will be going on around Fireside Chat, it's not unfeasible to think that they'd like to see what is going on. I did ask that during Fireside Chat you send through some of your questions, and then I threw out a term there, interspecific competition, without giving it any sort of reference points. I was expecting a few questions, and a few questions have come in. What is interspecific competition? I'm sure you'd love to answer. Basically, interspecific competition is competition between species, between different species for the same resource. And what I'd like to show you this week is Tingana, who had killed a full-grown female kudu, having that kudu stolen by the Styx Pride. And generally speaking out here, we see interspecific competition between hyena and leopard, and between hyena and lion, but we don't really witness it between lion and leopard, even though it's a fairly common thing. We were lucky in that it was a kudu, and that's why we got to see it, and that's why we got to show it to you. And it's on that I'm inviting you to send some questions in. Now, with their rough tongues, lions do lick off a lot of fur, and they also ingest a lot of fur from the prey that they eat, and they develop. Oh, look at another big yawn! Wow, those are going to make for some fantastic photographs and screenshots, I think. And these fur balls can actually be quite big, almost bigger than a tennis ball in actual fact. And every now and again, these lions are yawning. Every now and again, they will hack up one of these fur balls to get rid of this accumulated fur that they have in their bellies. And you find them on the odd occasion lying in the path that of where lion have been walking. Not a common thing to see. I've only seen a handful in my life. This compressed ball of fur, and they get it all from just cleaning themselves and from the fur that they eat. Another huge yawn. They're all stretching now. Well, at least three of the five are stretching. 2 are still comatose. Still just going through their sort of pre-flight checks. There we go. Roll over, stretch, lick, yawn. There, one of them has just started again. Normally takes about half an hour or so for them to wake up fully. He might get up and go to the bathroom. The little boy's bush. I think that's exactly what he's going to go and do. Yeah, that is one of the first signs marking territory. That is a very, very clear sign that these boys mean business in this area. There he goes to have his toilet break. He's busy urinating and scraping his feet. That's another clear sign we might show you on one of our tracking exercises. And he goes and lies down in another area. They're busy listening intently in the exact direction of Juma Dam. There might be something happening in the mud there that's carrying on the wind. And these boys are definitely hungry enough to make a concerted effort to hunt tonight for sure. They're definitely not skinny, but they're not that full. It looks like they ate yesterday morning a small meal, or potentially the night before last. So Marga from the Netherlands have noticed that on the face of these lions are a lot of small scratches and wanted to know whether it was from feeding that or from fighting. And it's a little bit of both, Marga. Those are scratches from tooth and claw around carcasses, both with each other and with other members of the pride. They started to actively compete for meat at carcasses when they were as young as 9 months old. That's where they got all their nutrition from, and because they weren't hunting themselves just yet, they had to fight for all the scraps they could around the pride. And from that day to this, these lions, every time there's food, there's guaranteed to be a scrap over the meat, and every little tiny tooth and claw mark that they have will eventually start to show an effect. Oh, another massive yawn. On their faces, to a point where they get nice and old and these scars have accumulated. Some lions' faces are almost bald with all the scar tissue that they carry. And it'll be one of the ways that we identify these lions in the future is distinctive scars. Another big yawn coming. Oh, those teeth are massive. The only canines in the bush to outmeasure a lion's canines are those of a baboon, believe it or not. So to give you an idea of how big those teeth actually are, this is my steering wheel. It's a 4-wheel drive steering wheel. I'll just wait for the... It's a 4-wheel drive steering wheel. There's my hand in the middle of the steering wheel. That lion's canine is 5 centimeters long as this finger. So there's the center of the steering wheel. Here's my finger. Give you an idea of how big that lion's canine is. 5 centimeters, or roughly, I would say, just over 25% of the diameter of a big steering wheel. Quite big. Jane in Colorado wanted to know if that male lion's urine smelt the same as a domestic tomcat's. That's a good question. It's definitely got a distinctive smell. You can smell it from quite a far way off, but it's not that acrid house cat smell. I definitely think that a house cat has a more sharp or a sharper, more acidic smell than what lion's urine has, although it's very similar, just not as intense. I love a lion's face in profile. Their skulls are actually nearly round. The slight protrusion over the nose and at the jaw. But when you look at a male lion with his mane and his nose and his whiskers, they've got quite an elongated face. Massive, massive jaw muscle attachments, top of their head. And on their cheeks, they really can generate an enormous amount of force. He's having a big stretch here next to the car. Have a look at those enormous forelegs. The power in these animals is just something incredible. I've watched a male lion this size pick up a buffalo, or the front half of a buffalo, easily 200 or 300 kilograms of buffalo, and throw it down on the floor. I think this male lion's also heading off to a toilet break. His brother is now woken up. What you would notice is that these male lions move away from where they're sleeping to go to the toilet. And unless they're really, really full around carcasses, they're actually quite clean animals. I don't know where he's going. He's moving off quite far now. Got a smell or a sound in his ears. Now he's lying down in the grass at the back there. I suppose each to their own. So it's getting to that time of the day where we have to make our way through to the fireside chat. The nice thing about tonight's fireside chat is these lions are actually almost part of the set already. We're only about 150, 200 meters away from fireside chat, so it's going to be interesting while we set up there and while we keep an eye on what we're doing and also over our shoulders to make sure we don't become part of the menu tonight. But Jamie is in the area. If these cats do get moving, she'll definitely come in and take over with the camera while we are setting ourselves up. So from myself and Jandre, the next time you see us is going to be at the fireside chat with a wary eye kept over my left shoulder. See you there.
Welcome back, guys. So while you were with Steph, I found my way out of Arethusa and back onto familiar ground around Djuma, largely thanks to the help from the wildebeest. And on the subject of the wildebeest, many of you have been wondering about the source of Liam's nickname, and he tells me it was due to the fact that around late November, early December, at the time that wildebeest was starting to calve, he actually spotted the first wildebeest that was giving birth, and that is where the name comes from. So guys, off to my right, I've got about 4 or 5 male buffalo bulls. So I know that you guys are wondering what the Birmingham boys might get up to, but never fear, I'm making my way in towards that area, especially since you were wondering if they might start thinking about hunting the buffalo that are at the dam. I'm going to make my way in that direction so that I can be around, and I've got my radio on. So if anything changes and they start to get a little bit more mobile and a bit more active, I can be there as quickly as I need to. Just got some grey go-away birds shouting. An alarm calling. So I just want to double check and see. Doesn't seem to be too frantic, so I don't think that it necessarily means that there's something big and scary out there, but I did just want to have a listen and see what they are, if they're going to continue shouting, just to know if I need to keep my eyes peeled We are just coming up to Treehouse Dam, which we'll be passing through in just a moment. So there might be something coming down for a late drink, but the birds have gone very, very quiet, so I think perhaps it might have just been some calling between them. Maybe they saw something briefly like an eagle. But they've stopped now, and I think it's time for us to move on and to just start to make our way in the direction and make sure that I can get to the Birmingham boys very quickly if something changes. Guys managed to pick up on that, but a little slender mongoose just ran across. And it has cleared up quite beautifully this evening. We've got a beautiful shot of the sun setting across the dam. Really beautiful and iconic look at a proper African sunset, beautifully framed in those trees. So thank you very much for that, Viam. It is truly beautiful and spectacular, and I always think that you should always take just that little bit of time when you're out in the bush just to really appreciate the beauty of what's around you, not just think it's all about necessarily the animals that you might be seeing or the animals you might be missing, but to remember that there's beauty to be found absolutely everywhere here. But for now, our sun is slowly disappearing. I'm going to start making my way across the dam. It doesn't seem to be much coming down to drink at the moment. Already for me, I've only really been in this area for just over a week. It's been 8 days now since I first arrived at Juma and at WildEarth, but it already is starting to feel like home. And that's the magic about the African bush. have little Dacre, who was bravely trying to drink. I didn't actually spot him just because we were looking straight into the sun, but he was around just having a quick drink. And now you can see how constantly alert these animals are. So he has had his evening drink. And on the subject of drinks, Heidi was asking about my earlier conversation about sausage tree fruits. And she's heard that you can make beer out of them. You can, as far as I know. The sausage tree fruits are edible. And most edible fruits you can allow to ferment. And there are a couple of various beverages, the most famous of them in this area being the amarula liqueur that is made from the fruits of the marula tree. Very smooth tasting drink and really delicious in coffee as well. There is also a marula beer, and I was very keen because I absolutely love the taste of marula fruits. So I was very keen to know how to make marula beer just out of pure curiosity. So I asked one of the guys that I was working with, who's lived in this area for a very long time, and he looked at me like I was just a little bit stupid, and he said, Jamie, all you do is you collect the fruits, you cut holes in the skin, you stick them in water, and you leave them for 3 days, and you will have marula beer. So nice, simple, easy beer to make. Definitely a beer to consume very responsibly. And it's interesting that there are a lot of edible fruits in this area, but I think that marula is probably the best tasting one, at least in my opinion. But the other fruit that I really, really like, and it's not a tree that we see so much in this area or at all in this area, but it's the tree that comes, the fruit that comes from the baobab trees. And these are those incredible trees that look like they've been planted upside down with their roots growing up into the sky, and they can reach absolutely enormous diameters. So they grow for a couple of, potentially 1,000 years or even longer. And I really, really like the taste of their fruit. It comes in a sort of a round ball, and when you break it open, the fruit inside, or the pulp inside, is not juicy and fleshy like the marula fruit. It's almost like a powdery taste, and it's very, very tart, but also with a sweetness to it. And what I often do is, whenever I get hold of baobab fruits, which is not that often anymore, I did used to work in an area with lots of baobabs, but what I used to do is just sort of make that into a fine powder, so rub it between my fingers and then mix it with water, and it's very, very refreshing and also incredibly good for you, so very high in vitamin C. And marula fruit as well also got a very high vitamin C content, which actually led some people to theorize that elephant bulls in must, which is where their testosterone levels sort of raise and they start to secrete from the glands up in their forehead, and also to dribble a little bit of urine constantly, and it makes them not necessarily more aggressive, but certainly more prone to aggression. And there's a couple of scientists who are actually theorizing that a bull in must, because his energy requirements and his energy output becomes a little bit higher, that they will actually try and target marula fruit almost constantly just to get that extra vitamin boost. Not sure if it's entirely true. I think all elephants will target marula fruit, but an interesting theory nonetheless. I've got a very cool question from Charlie, who is looking at the Dacre and other antelopes and wondering whether or not the antelope here will change their fur color according to the season. Thank you very much for that, Charlie. It's great to have you joining us on the Sunset Drive. They do not, as far as I know. The most color change that you will see is potentially when the antelope are very, very cold and they're feeling chilly, and they've puffed up the fur on their backs and their sides just to capture a little bit of warmth in the same way that we might get goosebumps when we are chilly. So on the subject of edible fruits in the bush, Bugsy would like to know if we get mango fruits out here in the Sabi Sands or in the Kruger Park. The answer, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think so. There is something called a wild mango tree, which I actually was discussing a couple of days ago on Drive, and it's found more towards the sort of Central African regions. Now, as far as I know, there are no mango trees in this area, but I could be corrected. So if any of you do know better than I do, I am new to this area, then please feel free to let me know. I would love to know, and you can send your comments through on #SafariLive at Twitter or on Twitter, and you can email through comments on questions@wildearth.tv. Station at the Musikaya, is that the one on Fleming's Cut Line? I would like to join you there, would that be okay? Copy that, thank you. So guys, just double checking in with the other guides in the area before I go barging into their sightings without asking. So just to keep you guys updated and in the loop, there has been no change in the activity with the Birmingham males. They are still where you guys left them when you were with Steph. So never fear, you aren't missing out, but I am very close to that area, so I could potentially be there very fast if I need to, or if I hear that anything changes. So what I wanted to do, just quickly while it's a nice time of day for this, I wanted to just pop my nose in to the hyena den and see what these guys have been up to. I like to check in fairly regularly. Last time I was here, it was just the 3 older cubs who were out, but I have heard reports from the other vehicle that it is active, so they are around. So we're just going to go in nice and quietly. And as some of you guys may know about me already, spotted hyenas are my favorite predator out in this area, which is why I enjoy coming to see them. And I can already see a couple of individuals out and about. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, there is a very, very young hyena cub at this den. So we'll be holding thumbs. Maybe we can get to see it. I'm just going to switch my car into low range just so I can idle my way forward without causing these guys any stress. There we go. I was going to stop here, but the little one changed his mind about where he's going to go. So guys, there's been a lot of discussion about the status of this cub and where it falls in terms of the hierarchy, especially when seen interacting with these slightly older cubs. Now, for those of you who don't know, hyena social status is hereditary. So right at the top is the matriarch, the head of the clan, And that tends to be one of the older females, the oldest female. And then below her, in sort of descending rank, are the other various females. And then below all other females sit the males. So males in spotted hyenas, no matter what rank they are, will always be considered to be below. So they will always be considered to be a little bit beneath any other female of the clan. But what we have noticed is that this little cub is very bold for its size, and that its mother is very vigorous in defending it. And we think that perhaps the mother is at least one of the high-ranking females, if not the matriarch. And it's interesting to see the interactions between them. These older cubs are at an age where they are starting to become very playful. Make my way nice and carefully so that I don't cause any disturbance to these guys. There we have the mother showing you guys exactly what I was saying about how vigorously she defends this little one. And you can see, even though it's much, much smaller than the others, still very bold in exploring. And this is a very, very young cub. I'm not sure of its exact age, but it can only be a couple of weeks old. But it is out and about exploring. Here you can see the mother grooming it very carefully. You can see these slightly older cubs are very desperate to go and explore and have a look at that little one, but the mother is very protective over it. Oh, one of them's managed to sneak in while her back's turned. But just looking at the behavior of that older cub, I would say that this tiny cub is most definitely one of the higher ranking, or has inherited the status of her mother, who will be a high-ranking female. Just because none of these older cubs seem to want to harass it too much. And I was witness to a situation about 2 years ago where we were monitoring a hyena den, and there were two females there with two sets of cubs. The matriarch had the older set of cubs, and then her daughter, so slightly below her in rank, had a smaller cub about roughly the size. And the matriarch's older cubs would very often bully the smaller cub, and whenever the smaller cub's mother tried to come to its rescue, the matriarch would immediately put her in her place and allow her older cubs to continue. And what I have noticed these youngsters doing, which is a first for me, I saw it for the first time the other day, and what that little one was doing was called anal pasting. So he was inverting his anal glands, which is what puts hyenas closer to something like a mongoose or a badger rather than cats or dogs. And it was very interesting to see that behavior, because that is adult territorial marking, and I did not know up until recently, up until basically 2 days ago, that cubs this young actually demonstrated that behavior. The little cub, the mother has moved off, so it's retreating into a slightly smaller burrow area, just to escape the slightly overly attentive affections from that older cub. And you can be sure, I mean, that cub won't be biting hard, but I'm sure that it's a little bit uncomfortable for such a young cub. Here we go, and the cub's little noises of distress has brought his mother back. His or her. I think it is potentially a female, but it's very, very hard to tell. What you doing? Liam, is that one coming to chew tires?
He's thinking of it.
He's thinking about it. Hey. Just got to keep an eye on them. They tend to steal the little plastic bit that sits over the center of my wheel. Hey now. Be good. And this other little one has made maneuverability a little bit tricky because I'm not entirely sure. Ah, here he pops out. And there. And this is why I love spotted hyenas so much. It's because their social interactions are always fascinating. If you do get lucky enough to come to an active den site, you always get to see the most exciting things. And of course it helps that they are so curious looking. And I also personally think they do look a little bit guilty, always like they've done something wrong. And a lot of the time, that's because they have... What are you doing? Hey. So I just took my foot off the brake there just to allow the car to rock a little bit, just to let them know that chewing my tire is not to be allowed. Just going to double check what this one's doing. Sorry guys, I might get across. Okay, we're fine. It's always good fun, and they definitely keep you on your toes when you're around their den, especially ones at this age, and they're just starting to become really very curious about their environment, and they tend to investigate whatever they are curious about using their mouths, which isn't something that I want them to learn to do, especially as they get a little bit older and their bite force becomes a little bit more powerful. I don't want them chewing on my tires or even vaguely learning that that is a good habit to have. It is something that they grow out of though. So adult hyenas can be very bold, but they do stop chewing people's tires. So I'm glad that we managed to get here right in the nick of time, because very soon we start to lose light, and it's not really ideal to use a spotlight on an active den, especially with a baby as young as that little cub that we saw. So I won't be sticking around too much longer. But guys, don't forget to join Steph and myself for the fireside chat, which will be starting very, very soon. So we've had a fantastic afternoon today. You guys got to see a little bit more of the Birmingham boys. We got to see a little bit more of the Birmingham boys who have made themselves known on Djuma for at least my first time. I'm sure that they have been around this area before, but very exciting times in the world of lions. And we got to see Sindile still safe and sound and sleeping just where we left him from this morning's drive. So guys, it is now time for us to move across to the fireside chat, where I will be joining Steph very shortly once I have left these guys. But I'm really looking forward to having a little bit of a chat. Please feel free to send your questions through to #SafariLive or questions@wildearth.tv. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to Wiem for his fantastic camera work and animal spotting and directing when I got a little bit lost. So guys, I will see you in just a couple of minutes, but for now I'm going to pass you along back to Steph, who's waiting to start chatting about the week that we've had. See you guys in just a little bit.